My name is Mara Callahan, and I've learned that power and righteousness aren't the same thing. Power is loud, demanding, backed by money and lawyers, and the kind of confidence that comes from never being told no. Righteousness is quieter. It lives in old documents nobody bothered to read, in promises made by better men, in the patient work of someone who cares enough to dig through dust until truth surfaces. This is the story of how I reminded one very powerful man that sometimes the law has a longer memory than arrogance. It started on a Tuesday morning in late July, when the heat in Sagebrush County had already climbed past 100 degrees before 9. .m? The kind of heat that makes asphalt soft and air shimmer like water. I was in my office, fan rattling overhead, working through incident reports when Rosa knocked on my doorframe. "Boss," she said, her voice carrying that particular tone that meant complicated trouble. "We've got visitors." Through my window, I saw them. 5 people standing in the parking lot, 3 of them elderly, moving slowly in the punishing sun. They wore traditional clothing woven patterns in deep reds and earth tones, and carried themselves with the quiet dignity of people who'd survived things I could only imagine. I recognized Joseph Whitefeather immediately. He was 82 years old, a respected elder of the Tohono O'odham Nation, and I'd never seen him look this tired. "Send them in," I said, "and get them water. Cold." They filed into my office, grateful for the shade and the ancient AC unit that barely worked. Joseph shook my hand with a grip that was still strong despite his age. "Sheriff Callahan," he said, "we need your help." "Anything?" I told him, meaning it. He unfolded a hand-drawn map on my desk. "Agua Sagrada, the sacred spring. Our people have used this water for longer than there have been fences in this land. Longer than there have been sheriffs." I knew the spring. Everyone in the county did. It sat on the edge of Derek Hutchins' massive ranch, a natural artesian well that had been feeding communities for centuries. "What's wrong with it?" "Hutchins has closed it," Joseph said quietly. 3 weeks ago, he put up electric fences, guards' signs threatening prosecution for trespass. "Our children are going thirsty, Sheriff. Our crops are dying." My jaw tightened. "Did you talk to him?" "We tried. He said it's his land now. His water. He said we have no legal right." I looked at the map, at the spring marked in faded blue ink, at the irrigation channels that had been drawn and redrawn over generations. "Let me look into this." After they left, Rosa leaned against the doorway. "Boss, you know who you're dealing with, right? Derek Hutchins owns 40,000 acres. He's got connections all the way to the state capitol. And lawyers, so many lawyers I know. So what are you going to do?" I looked out at the desert, heat waves rising off the sand like ghosts. My job. The Hutchins Ranch sprawled across the northern edge of the county like a small kingdom. The main house was a sprawling adobe structure with a red tile roof, surrounded by corrals, barns, and bunkhouses for the dozen cowboys who worked the land. Derek Hutchins ran cattle horses, and enough political influence to make most elected officials nervous. I drove through the main gate, no need for permission yet. This was still a courtesy visitant. Found Derek near the stables, sitting astride a beautiful Palomino mare. He was 53, tanned from a lifetime under the Arizona sun, wearing expensive boots and a Stetson that probably cost more than my monthly rent. 3 cowboys stood nearby, all armed. Not unusual for ranch work. But the way they positioned themselves was deliberate. Next to Derek stood a man in a suit that had no business being in the desert. Carlton Hayes, attorney out of Phoenix, known for representing developers, mining companies, and anyone else with enough money to buy aggressive legal representation. "Sheriff," Derek said, not bothering to dismount. "You're on private property, Mr. Hutchins," I replied evenly. "I'm here about Agua Sagrada." He laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive. "This spring." "What about it?" "You've blocked access. There are communities that depend on that water, communities that have no legal claim to my land." Carlton interjected smoothly. "The spring sits entirely within the Hutchins property boundaries. Deed verified. Survey confirmed. Any access would constitute trespass. I looked past them, toward the rise where I could see the new fencing. Chain link topped with razor wire, electrified, with warning signs every 10 feet. It was designed not just to keep people out, but to send a message. Mr. Hutchins, I said carefully, those people have been using that spring for generations. It's sacred to them. Surely there's some accommodation sacred? Derek spat the word like a curse. This is private property, Sheriff. My family has owned this land for 3 generations. I have the deeds. I have the surveys. I have the law on my side. Any attempt to force access, Carlton added, pulling out a tablet, will be met with immediate legal action. The Sheriff's Department has no jurisdiction over private property disputes. This is a civil matter, and frankly, it's already settled. I looked at the spring in the distance. Even from here, I could see the water crystal clear bubbling up from somewhere deep in the earth. Children used to swim there in summer. Families would picnic by the cottonwoods that grew thick around the edges. Now it was surrounded by warnings and voltage. I'll review the records, I said. Derek smirked. You do that, sweetheart? My lawyers already have. 3 times. There's nothing to find. I climbed back into my truck, but before I started the engine, I looked at him one more time. Mr. Hutchins, sometimes things get overlooked, even by good lawyers. There's nothing overlooked here, he said. This is my land. End of story. I smiled slightly. Then you won't mind if I verify that myself? His confident expression flickered. Just for a second, that was enough. The old county courthouse sat on Main Street. A 2-story adobe building that had been standing since 1912. Most county business had moved to the new administrative building 10 years ago. But the old courthouse still held the archive's decades of deeds, surveys, water rights agreements, and historical documents that nobody had bothered to digitize. The basement smelled like old paper, dust, and something vaguely organic that I tried not to think about. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, half of them dead or flickering. Rows of metal shelves held cardboard boxes that were slowly disintegrating, their contents threatening to spill onto the concrete floor. Rosa thought I was wasting my time. Boss, if there was something, Hutchins' legal team would have found it. These guys bill $400 an hour. They don't miss things. I pulled down a box marked Property Transfers 1950 to 1960 and started sorting through yellowed documents. Expensive lawyers look for what their clients tell them to look for. I'm looking for what nobody thought to hide. She sighed but helped anyway, pulling boxes, making piles, organizing chaos into something searchable. We worked for 3 days. I found the Hutchins family deeds going back to 1952. When Derek's grandfather bought the original 2,000 acres from a failing mining company, every subsequent purchase was documented. 1961, another 3,000 acres. 1,973, a major expansion of 12,000 acres. More land acquired during the farm crisis when smaller ranchers were forced to sell. Everything appeared legitimate. Clean transfers, proper surveys. No obvious gaps. But something bothered me. On a water rights map from 1987, I noticed irrigation channels marked in blue pencil that crossed from Hutchins' land toward the tribal territories. Why would irrigation go from private land to benefit someone else? Unless there was an agreement. I started pulling boxes from 1987. Agricultural agreements, drought relief programs, water conservation initiatives. That's when I found it. Inside a manila envelope marked Drought Relief Agreements 1987 archived. There was a document I'd seen versions of before, but never in this context. A permanent easement agreement. My hands started shaking as I read. Asterisk, asterisk, perpetual. Easement and right-of-way agreement. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Date, August 12, 1987, asterisk, 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 grantor. Thomas Hutchins. Owner of Hutchins Ranch, asterisk, 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 grantee. Tohono O'odham Nation. represented by the Tribal Council **** terms. In exchange for water diversion rights from the Santa Cruz River during the historic drought of 1987, Thomas Hutchins hereby grants unrestricted and perpetual access to the natural spring known as Agua Sagrada for traditional, agricultural, and domestic use by members of the Tohono O'odham Nation. This easement is irrevocable and binding upon all heirs successors, and assigns *** signed, notarized, registered with the county, and then buried. I photographed every page with my phone, hands trembling. This wasn't just a historical footnote. This was legally binding. Perpetual easements don't expire. They transfer with the land. Forever. Derek had inherited the land from his father. He'd also inherited this promise, and either he'd never bothered to read the fine print, or he'd deliberately ignored it. Rosa came over, saw my expression. "What did you find?" I showed her the document. She read it twice, then looked up at me. "Holy shit." "Yeah, this is solid. Solid as they come. Notarized, recorded, still legally enforceable. He's going to fight this. Hutchins will throw everything at you." I carefully placed the document back in its envelope, then into a protective folder. Let him fight. I've got the law on my side. And this time, the law has a memory longer than his bank account. I called a mandatory public meeting. Under Arizona law, any dispute involving public access to water resources required open hearings with all involved parties present. Derek couldn't refuse without looking like he had something to hide. The town hall was packed. Tribal elders sat on one side, faces weathered but hopeful. Derek arrived with Carlton Hayes and 2 private security guards in suits that barely concealed their shoulder holsters. The mayor sat at the front. Nervous Hutchins was a major campaign donor. I stood at the podium, a cardboard tube on the table in front of me. Derek sprawled in his chair, boots propped on the seat in front of him, radiating bored confidence. "Let's make this quick, Sheriff. I've got better things to do." "I'm sure you do," I said evenly. "But this won't take long." I opened the tube and carefully unrolled the 1987 easement agreement, using books to hold down the corners. The paper was yellowed but legible. The signatures dark and clear. The room went silent. Carlton Hayes leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "What is that?" "A perpetual easement agreement," I said, my voice calm and professional. "Signed by Thomas Hutchins on August 12th, 1987. It grants the Tohono O'odham, a nation, unrestricted and irrevocable access to Agua Sagrada in exchange for water diversion rights during that year's drought." Derek's boots hit the floor. That's impossible." "It's notarized," I continued, "recorded with the county clerk, and still legally binding." Carlton snatched up the document, reading rapidly. His face went from skeptical to concerned to pale in about 15 seconds. "Where did you get this?" "County archives. Drought relief agreements, 1987. It was filed properly. It's just been sitting there." Shot to his feet. "My father never would have signed this. This is a forgery." I placed a second document on the Tabola photocopy of Thomas Hutchins' signature from a cattle sale agreement, dated 1986. The signatures were identical. Joseph Whitefeather stood slowly, his voice quiet but carrying through the room. I remember that day. I was 17 years old. It hadn't rained in 8 months. Our wells were dry. Your father was an honorable man, Derek. He made a promise and he kept it. You should honor that." Derek's face turned red. "This is bullshit. I'm Derek Hutchins. My family built this county. You can't do this to me." I met his eyes, my voice steady as stone. "I'm not doing anything to you, Mr. Hutchins. I'm simply enforcing an agreement your father made, one that's still legal and binding." "I'll fight this," he snarled. "I'll take it to every court in this state." "That's your right," I said. "But the law is clear, and I have a feeling your father understood something you haven't learned yet." "What's that?" "That land isn't just property. It's responsibility." Carlton Hayes tried everything. He filed for judicial review. claiming the document had expired through non-use, countered with legal precedent showing that perpetual easements don't expire without written renunciation, which Thomas Hutchins had never provided. He argued that modern property law superseded outdated agreements. Brought in a property law professor from the University of Arizona who testified that perpetual easements were among the most protected property rights in American law. He claimed the tribal PHO community had abandoned their claim. One presented 36 witnesses, elders, parents, children who testified to generations of continuous use until the fences went up. The court hearing lasted 2 days. I'd learned property law the hard way. In military intelligence units in Iraq and Afghanistan, helping resolve tribal land disputes, tracking stolen properties, mediating conflicts between occupying forces and local populations. I'd studied under JAG lawyers who'd forgotten more about land rights than Carlton Hayes would ever know. When it was my turn to testify, I laid out the history, the law, and the precedents with the precision of someone who'd done this kind of work in places where mistakes cost lives. The judge, a 70-year-old man named Harold Brennan who'd grown up hunting in these mountains, listened to everything in silence. When Carlton finished his final argument, a theatrical performance about sacred property rights, Judge Brennan removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "Mr. Hayes," he said, sounding tired, "the easement is valid. The signature is authentic. The filing was proper. And the law is unambiguous. Perpetual easements don't expire through non-use. They expire through written renunciation, which was never provided." Derek shot to his feet. "This is robbery. You're stealing my land." "Nobody's stealing anything," Judge Brennan said firmly. "We're enforcing an agreement your father made in good faith. The easement grants access to the spring, not ownership of your land. Learn the difference." He banged his gavel. "Judgment for the Tohono O'odham Nation. Access to Agua Sagrada will be restored immediately. Mr. Hutchins will remove all barriers within 72 hours or face contempt charges." Derek turned to me, his face twisted with rage. "You'll regret this." I didn't blink. "Threatening a law enforcement officer is a crime, Mr. Hutchins. Would you like to add that to today's record?" His lawyer grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the exit. 1 week later, I stood in the desert sun watching workers cut down the electric fencing around Agua Sagrada. The razor wire came down in sections. The warning signs were loaded onto trucks, and slowly, the spring opened again like a wound finally allowed to heal. The children came first. They ran across the sand, laughing, stripping off shoes, and wading into the clear, cold water. Their laughter echoed across the desert, pure and joyful. The sound of something being set right after too long being broken. The elders came next, moving slowly, some with tears streaming down weathered faces. Joseph Whitefeather approached me, holding something small wrapped in cloth. This belonged to my grandfather. He was friends with Thomas Hutchins back when men understood that promises mattered. He would want you to have it. He unwrapped a small silver medallion, stamped with a water symbol and a desert flower. It was beautiful, clearly old, clearly precious. "Mr. Whitefeather, I can't you honor the past," he said firmly. "That deserves to be remembered." I took it, feeling the weight of history in my palm. "Thank you." That night, Derek showed up at my office. No lawyers, no security. Just a man who looked like he'd aged 10 years in a week. "You destroyed my reputation," he said quietly. "I enforce the law," I replied. "Your father made a promise. You chose to ignore it." "I didn't know you didn't want to know," I corrected. "There's a difference. Your father's files were available. His agreements were on record. You just never bothered to look because you assumed your money and your name made you untouchable." He stared at the floor. He was better than me, wasn't he? I considered that. Your father understood something you're just learning. That land isn't just what you own. It's what you're responsible for. And some promises are bigger than pride. He left without another word, but something changed after that, over the following weeks. Derek started working with the tribal council on water conservation projects. Not out of kindness, out of practicality. But it was a start. Rosa asked me how I'd known where to look. Military training, I said. I spent years tracking property theft in war zones. You learn to look not just at what's there, but at what should be there and isn't. Gaps in records. Missing documents. Things filed in the wrong place because someone wanted them forgotten. And if you hadn't found the easement, I smiled. Then I would have kept looking. Justice always finds a way. You just have to care enough to dig for it. That night, I drove out to Agua Sagrada. The moon was full, turning the water to liquid silver. I could hear children's laughter in the distance, families gathering for an evening meal. The sound of life returning to a place that had been silenced by greed. I thought about Thomas Hutchins, a man I'd never met who'd made a promise almost 40 years ago and kept it. His son had tried to bury that promise under money and arrogance, but promises written in ink and filed with the law have a way of surviving. I touched the medallion Joseph had given me. Warm from my pocket, some battles aren't fought with weapons. Some are fought with patience, research, and the stubborn refusal to let history be buried by those who find it inconvenient. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of sage and water and the desert after dark. And Mara Callahan, Sheriff of Sagebrush County, went home knowing that, today at least, the law had remembered something important, that power without honor is just noise. But honor, backed by truth and stubbornness, can move mountains, or at least open a spring. She read it twice, then looked up at me. Holy shit.